I know we have some other people RSVP'd, but I want to, 7 o'clock. So we'll honor those that are on time. Thank you all for being here. My name is Olivia Zing, the Executive Director for Open Democracy. And we'll start tonight. We're an organization that works on campaign finance reform, redistricting, and voting rights. And we're really honored to put together today's program with the League of Women Voters. I wanted to start tonight's program with Ophelia doing a land acknowledgement. So I'll turn it over to Ophelia for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Ophelia, and I am the democracy organizer with Open Democracy, and thank you, everyone, for joining. Open Democracy acknowledges that we do our work on the Ndakina, the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the people who have stewarded Ndakina throughout the generations and continue to do so today.
Thank you so much. We'll turn tonight's program over to Liz Tantarelli to begin to explain the basics on how to lobby. Thank you, Liz, for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Olivia. And I see many familiar faces here from League of Women Voters and from Open Democracy. We often testify in the same way on the same bills. But in whatever way you want to testify, whether as an individual, as a member of a group, testifying before committee hearings is a way to make your voice heard by the legislators. But more than that, it's a valuable resource to the legislators. The people serving on the committees can't possibly know everything, all the background about the bills they're hearing. And the members of the public, like us, can really supply information. So I will be talking about some of the ways that I do research for a bill in order to create testimony that may or may not have an impact. I won't say I've got 100% record. It doesn't work that way. But I think that after committees hear testimony, they are in a better position to vote. So that's why we encourage people to submit testimony, whether it's the kind of research stuff that I do or lived experience. And we've got a couple of people who are going to be talking about that. But first, I want to make sure that everybody on this call knows how to find the bills that are being heard and some clues to how to read those bills so that you know what to do with them. So I am going to share my screen at this point, and I'm going to the General Court website. If you cannot see this, would you somehow indicate that? But you should be seeing the General Court website. And it's gencourt.state.nh.us. So this is where you start, and you'll notice there's a House button, a Senate button, and a lot of other stuff. I'm going to scroll down a wee bit and start talking about finding a bill. So I thought, let's start from the point of view of an ordinary person who heard that there was a bill about plastics. And I've got a neighbor who asked me recently about plastics. So there are different ways to do this. Let's see what happens if we go to a quick search. So I just clicked on quick search there. Well, that wants a bill number and a subject. Let's see, can we find it with a subject? Ooh, I'm not sure that's going to work. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try advanced bill search. Now, maybe some of you haven't done this. You see, I'm under current bills on the left-hand side of the screen. Advanced bill search lets me try something with a title. So I'm going to try plastics. Maybe just plastic and see what happens. Oh, look, there's a bill. Yes, this is the one I was looking for. Isn't that marvelous? So House Bill 1207 is relative to single-use disposable plastic foodware accessories. That means forks and spoons and plastic straws when you go to a sort of fast food place. That's the bill I wanted to testify on. So now I can decide, if that's the bill, I could just click on the bill and we'll read the text. I could find the docket of when it's going to be heard. It's actually says it right here because it's been scheduled. It's being heard next week on what is that, Tuesday or something. But let's look at the text of the bill. So I know it's in the House, it's in a committee, it's in the House Commerce and Consumer Affairs Committee. I'm seeing all of this just by clicking on that plastics topic and coming up with this. But let's look at the text of the bill. I find it easier to read the PDF. I'm clicking on that. And we're going to see what's here. All right, so we have the title of the number of the bill, House Bill, which means HB 1207. You basically can ignore the FN for now. It won't help you with your search. The act says what it's about, these disposable plastic foodwares. Here's the sponsors. And you can't tell from this list whether they're Republicans or Dems, can you? There are ways to find that out, but you can't tell from this. It tells you the committee. The analysis is more helpful than the title of the bill. So I'm down here at analysis, and this is what the bill does. Prohibits certain food facilities from having self-serve or self-service disposable plastic accessories, except upon request of the customer. So you're not going to find a bunch of spoons sitting there next to your checkout counter anymore. You're going to have to ask for them. All right, here it goes to the next page of the bill. Here is the actual bill. It's going to explain it. It's going to reference a section of law. The line numbers are very useful because the committee will have a copy of the bill with the same line numbers. So if you want to reference something specific in your testimony, knowing that it's on page 2, line 24 or something makes sense. So they define all the terms. They're now going, this is a long bill. Maybe I didn't pick, it's not that long. And so it's, explains what the bill will do. What do you do now? If this really is a bill you want to testify on, you're asking yourself, there's something in here that I really, let's say you oppose. And you have worked perhaps in restaurants. You know why this bill won't work. So you can use that lived experience. But maybe you've also done some research. Maybe you're on the other side and you say, this is good because our research for environmental impact shows us why these plastics, these single-use plastics, are so damaging. So based on that, you then go out and do your research. Now, before I get to talking about that, let's go back and pretend that you didn't quite find it that way. Somebody gave you a bill number. So here we are back on the home page, and somebody told you, you should call your legislators about HB 1207. It's about plastics, and they got you all geared up. So just typing the bill number that way, how HB means it's a House originating bill, SB means Senate. We've got the bill number, and then if you click the search, we come up with the same kind of thing. And then you just click on the bill number on the left, and you're back to that page we talked about with the other search. So it doesn't matter how you get here, you're finding these bills. You can also, if you're saying, I'm not looking for a particular bill, but I really want to see what the environmental bills are, for instance, you can go to the House homepage and you can look at committees, the standing committees. And my goodness, I bet there is an Environment and Agriculture committee. And if you click on that, you can see a list of bills currently in committee. There are 41 bills in this committee. Well, it's not as bad as some others, folks. And so now you've got, again, the title, and now you could just click on the number here to get more information. I realize for some of you, this is old hat, but there may be some people on here who haven't tried to do this. I try to print out the bills because if I'm going to be writing testimony and I'm going to be doing research for it, I really want to have that language in front of me. When is a bill scheduled for a hearing? Well, the bills that are listed right here, they seem to be scheduled already. Do you see it says next or last hearing? And there's a date and a time. And near the top, you'll find the room number. Legislative Office Building, room 301, 303. They've doubled up all the rooms lately. So it doesn't matter which of those numbers you'll look for. But when we get down here, these bills haven't been scheduled yet. So even if you were to click on the bill number and try to look at the docket, it's probably not there. Say the docket doesn't get me anywhere. So it hasn't been scheduled yet, but eventually you'll find it. It will be scheduled. Every bill gets a hearing. All right, let's close this. And let's go back because again, I want to get to that home page and point out that there's one other way to find out. Somebody tells you, sorry, got to go back one more. Somebody tells you there is a Senate bill next week that we really need to testify on. So sorry, I've got to get back here. I'm just trying to get back to my home page, the General Court's home page. And now we're going to look on the right-hand column here. And you see down here, it says Senate. There's Senate calendar, Senate meeting schedule. Play with these when you have time, and you will see that the bills are listed. The committees are listed. And then if you click on it, you'll see which bills are there and so on. And they're by date. Doesn't go very far out. Rarely goes out more than about 10 days. It may go out more later. Olivia, would you agree I can stop here and start talking about the testimony itself? Okay. So I am going to stop share so that I can see you people again. Thank you. And let's talk about testimony. I'm going to talk about preparing written testimony, but it doesn't have to be written for you to testify. But let me start talking about the written testimony first, and then we'll talk about presenting it orally or presenting oral testimony without having a script or something to submit. When I present testimony for League of Women Voters, I use our letterhead at the top of the paper. I'm going to hold this up. Maybe you can see it. There's a letterhead. And there is a date under it. And then it's addressed to, this is House Election Law Chair and the committee. And I would use the chair's name. I think it's still Ross Berry this year. And then from. So think of this as a business letter, your written testimony. You've got the date, and I use the date of the hearing, to the committee that it's addressed to, and it's addressed primarily to the chair and the committee in that order. You're really talking to the chair when you're giving oral testimony. And then from, and I use my name, and if I'm using my title as president of the League of Women Voters, I will put that in there. And then I use the League's email address as contact information in the second line under my name and title. These written documents become part of public records. So if you don't want your phone number or email as part of public record, do not put it on your written testimony. You don't have to. I do because it's a public email, and that way, if anybody should ever want to question me about the testimony, they can find that and email me, not via my personal email, but via the league's testimony. And then it's time to identify the bill you're talking about. And it can be in a sentence, it can be in a bold line. We'll use the plastic again, HB 1207 about the use, about the prohibition of single-use plastics. And sometimes I say, we support HB 1207, or we oppose HB 1207. So it's very easy for the committee to flip through their various written testimonies and say, I want to group all the pros and all the cons as I look at it before we go to executive session. So now you start thinking, what am I writing? What's my testimony? You've read the bill, you've done some research, you're going to put it together. And I would like to show you something I'm cleaning out at home, by the way. And I've decided I really don't need testimony from 3 years ago. It can be filed in the league office. So this was some testimony I submitted back in 2018, and it has a number of pages. This was about the bill to allow absentee voting when there was a storm on election day. And remember, we had those 2 years back-to-back town meeting storms. So all these additional pages are copies of news reports from those years that show just how bad it was. And it's not the way I usually put testimony together, but I often have an appendix with some information. I don't read that to the committee. I say there is additional information. I've got the snow totals for those days. I've got the news reports. I've got quotes from town managers who are having troubles keeping the polls open, whatever it is. I just kind of summarize it and says it is in my written testimony. So I tend to turn in term papers as testimony sometimes. And some committees appreciate that. Some, I think, don't bother reading it. But for those who do, it is researched material and it's referenced. When you've prepared your testimony now, I usually close with the line, for these reasons, we ask you to oppose HB 1207 or whatever, or we ask you to support it. And that's kind of how I close out the testimony. And then the researched material follows. But let's talk about now presenting this. So let's pretend you're going into the house, you're going to present this testimony on plastics. You go into the room, and near the front door are a pile of these little pink cards. If you're going to speak, you pick one up, you fill it out with the bill number and the date and the committee, and whether you support or oppose the bill, and the time needed to speak. I saw in one committee, somebody said, I need 15 minutes. Well, the chair laughed at him. So my suggestion is put down 2 minutes. It may take you 3, but it doesn't matter. Put down 2 minutes. They may limit you to 2 or 3 minutes. And then your personal information is at the bottom. And again, this is public record. They do ask for your address and your phone number, and if you're representing a group. And if you don't want your phone number to be public knowledge, don't put it on there. But you should put your name and your town at the minimum. And then this is turned in usually to the clerk of the committee. Sometimes there's a little pile right at the first, where the first person sits on the committee. And then eventually they call you. You probably will not be first because the sponsor is first. Other legislators present then speak, and eventually some cards are drawn and you get to speak. So you go up, you turn on the microphone, you sit down, and you introduce yourself. I'm Liz Tentarelli from Newbury. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I have a lot of experience with helping voters try to navigate on election day, something like that. We heard some excellent testimony today in a committee from Bev Cotton, who did her name and where she was from, and then said, I'm an election worker and I'm an advocate, an activist with several pro-voting groups. So you establish your credentials. If you have lived experience, you're going to do that a little bit differently, but you kind of establish why people should listen to you. I usually start then by saying thank you for this opportunity to speak to the committee on House Bill 1207. And here is one reason we oppose it. And then I summarize it. I do not read my testimony. So I have my testimony printed out in enough copies for the whole committee, plus 1 or 2 extras for the clerk. But I'm not just going to stand there and read it. I will turn those in at the end of my testimony. Instead, I have a larger print version of my testimony with some stuff highlighted that I would like to speak to. And here is where I would urge you, if you are testifying and there are many other people testifying, pay attention to what other people have said, so that when it is your turn, you are not repeating what they said, and you're not getting up there and saying, I don't want to repeat what's already said. You can merely say, speakers before me have made many of these good points. I would like to just address one. And then you focus on something that needs emphasis. So even though your testimony may have a lot more material in it in the written form, respect the time of everybody else and just kind of point out a few things to the committee. Try to do it conversationally. And when you're done, just say, thank you for this opportunity. At which point, the chair will say, are you willing to take questions? Now, it's nice if you're willing to. You don't have to. You could say, not today, please. But if you are willing to, it's nice to say that. And then there may or may not be questions. If there are questions, it seems to be the pattern to say, thank you for that question. Even if what you're really thinking in your head is, what a stupid question. You don't say that. It's, thank you for that question. You answer it as best you can. And if you can't answer it, you can always say, that's an interesting point I hadn't considered. If you think you can find an answer, you can tell them, I can mail you that information later. If it's something that you researched but you don't have with you. Otherwise, just say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that should be researched. You don't say you have to do it, but it should be done. The only difference between testifying in the House and the Senate is that the Senate does not use pink cards. When you go into the Senate room, there is a sign-up sheet on a table right near the door. You write your name and I think your town, and if you're part of a group, you can write the group, and you can write either support or oppose and whether or not you wish to speak. So if you plan to speak, you can click that one off and it will usually say whether you're supporting or opposing. The Senate likes to juggle back and forth between opposing and supporting testimony, which I think is very effective. But you can turn in written testimony without signing up, without speaking. So if you just want to submit written testimony, you can give it to the clerk of the committee, and Olivia will talk later about how to submit it online. But I think that is about what I wanted to say, and I realize I've gone a wee bit over time. So unless, Olivia, you want me to address something in particular, I will turn it over to
We'll bring you back. We'll bring you back for questions and answers, Liz.
Okay.
Next up is Henry Vayu, who's been a lobbyist for 30, I don't even know, Henry, you can tell us how many years or decades you have been a lobbyist at the New Hampshire State House, and Henry will share some tips and best practices on how to lobby, and also sort of knowing our audience, what to say to a Senate committee versus a House committee. So, and over to Henry.
Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, so I started lobbying back in 1986. So this is what, 30, coming up on 30, 38 years, 37, 38 years, something like that. Anyways, let me just touch base first on knowing your audience. When I go into a committee, one thing I like to do is kind of get a sense of who are these people that I'm talking to. We're humans. We all come with biases. Biases aren't a bad thing. It's human nature. We all come with biases. They're shaped by our life experiences, organizations that we're involved with. And there are some tools that can help you find out who these people are that you're going to be talking to. Let me see. Can I do a share screen here? Yeah, I can. Let's see. Where's the? Oh, here we go. Everyone see that? Is that up there? Yeah. So here's the general court page. Let's just, for instance, pull up the House standing committees. Let's go to Ways and Means Committee. We go to the Ways and Means Committee, and they have the committee members. Let's pull up Susan Almy. She's the ranking Democrat on the committee, and they have a little bit of information. They have the committee information, but they have personal biography there. You can find out her background, some of the organizations that she's been involved with. So again, you can't immediately, tell what Susan is all about, but certainly some of this background information can give you a little bit of sense of who these people are that you're talking to. So I find this as a useful tool. Again, you can click on any of these committee members and just get a sense of what their background is. There's another tool that I use. A lot of the insiders have this. Maybe Olivia has it, but it's the Manual of Elected Officials. And it has much more information in here than you can find online. It has a lot more of their voting records, some little more personal stuff about them. So it is helpful to get a sense of who you're talking to. When you are testifying on bills in a committee, I group committee members and how they're going to react to your testimony into like 3 groups. There are going to be those that are going to be with you 100%. And when they ask you questions, you can kind of tell they're with you because they just gave you a softball to hit out of the park. And you can sense it. You're like, okay, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked me that question. And boom, you give a great answer. And then there's going to be those that are totally against what you're talking about. And there's no way you're going to be able to convince them otherwise. And that's fine. And you can tell sometimes by the questions they ask and the way they lead it. And you can't change some of those people's minds. And then there are going to be those people that really haven't made their minds up yet. They're open to all kinds of thoughts. They want to get all the information they can. Those are the people you really need to speak to. And those are the people that ultimately will decide which way the bill is going to go. Those people that really kind of undecided. I thought Liz did a great job at talking about how to deliver the testimony. I always try to keep it to no more than 3 minutes. 5 minutes at the most, 5 minutes a stretch, 3 minutes, because there's a whole bunch of other people that are going to speak. you got to realize some of these committees are hearing 7 bills in a day. If you're testifying in the afternoon, they've already sat through 4 hours of testimony, and we're all human. You sit through 4 hours of testimony and you get another hour ahead of you. You want people to be very brief and concise. What I try to do is I try to tell myself, all right, in 60 seconds, what is the most important thing I want these people to get away with what I'm saying? You got to boil it down that much. Liz was right. You can have your written testimony that can go into a heck of a lot, much more detail, but you've got to try to start off in the first 60 seconds. If you can boil it down into what you really want to get across, that's the most effective way, because their attention span will wane the longer you talk. You can see it in their eyes. They're starting to look off in the distance, but the first 60 seconds is when you have their attention. And that is when you have to get out exactly what you want them to do. Do you want them to pass the bill? Do you want them to kill the bill? What's the most important reason why you want them to pass or kill? It's always good to have some sort of backup data, the testimony that I believe this, I believe that. If you have something that supports the case you're trying to make, obviously, that's good. Don't go into detail in your testimony. Have it in your written testimony, or say, I have some stuff here I can hand out. Let them know, your contact information if there's follow-up. Liz is right. If you don't, you're going to get questions that you can't answer. I get them sometimes, and I can't answer questions. And you just got to be honest up front, say, I don't know the answer, but I can try to get you the answer. I know where I can get that, and I'll follow up and make sure to do the follow-up. Let me see what else. I think that's it.
Any tips, Henry, from doing this for many years? Any other tips?
Just remember that they all come from varied backgrounds. Some of them will have a lot of knowledge about the subject matter that's before them. Others won't. And so don't think that they know more than you do. Sometimes you will know more than they do, and that's why they like to have you there. If you've been involved in elections or stuff, you've been involved in organizations that the subject matter is about, you probably know more about that issue than them, and they'll value that. The ones that are in the middle, again, there's the ones that are going to be for and against. Play to that crowd that really wants to take what you're saying, and don't be anxious. They're just people, regular people,
Thanks, Henry. Our next speaker is Ophelia Burnett, who will talk about how to share personal life experience in testimony to committee, and why telling personal stories matter in testimony. But before that, I see the question in the chat about the Blue Book, and I'll maybe ask Henry to put information about where folks can purchase the Blue Book. If you don't want to buy one, there is one in the Open Democracy office, so you're always welcome to pop into our office and borrow
Just
our.
call Olivia or email her. She'll give you all the information.
I'll just copy a page if you're what you're looking for, but there is a copy in our office. So over to Ophelia.
Thank you, Olivia. So I'm not as experienced as Liz and Henry is. I've been doing this work for about 2 years, but I just broke down when sharing your personal or lived experience story into 4 parts. I did introduction, your personal story, the importance of your testimony, and the impact of your testimony. So with your introduction, when writing, doing your testimony on your personal story or your lived experience, it's good to start with a captivating opening to grab your audience's attention. You can start off with a quote or a thought-provoking question. And if you want to make sure that you clearly state the purpose of your speech. You don't want to speak about something that has nothing to do with why you're testifying. Like Liz said, if you're talking on a bill on plastic, you don't want to talk about elections. So you want to be very clear on the purpose of your speech. Now to your personal story, you want to you want to share your personal story and explain how it connects to the issues that you want to address. Be authentic and vulnerable. This will help the audience connect with your experience. Describe the challenges you face and the impact it had on your life, maybe your family's life, loved ones, anyone that's involved with you as well. Use vivid language and emotional appeal to make your story compelling. Then the importance of your testimony. It's so important for individuals with personal stories and lived experiences to give testimony at the State House. There is such power in personal narratives in shaping policy and influencing lawmakers' decisions. Me personally, I genuinely feel that narratives are more effective than facts, but that's just my opinion. When you're listening, if you're at the State House and like Henry was saying, you know, people's attention spans nowadays are very short. You know, people start listening, then they start, you know, going off into space. They kind of don't want to sit there for too long listening. And sometimes when people are saying, you know, statistics says that 5 out of 10 people end up in mental health institutions, and they just keep on talking about numbers. People are not really interested and don't really get engaged with you. But when you start talking about your personal experience, saying things like, maybe when there was a time that you were going through a rough time and you decided to go to, you know, the mental health institution because you wanted to do better for your family and your kids and your loved ones, people tend more to connect to that than to hear numbers and to statistics all the time. The next part that I have is the impact of your testimony. Your personal story could potentially have an impact on not just lawmakers, but the community as well. You can humanize the issues at hand and create empathy among policymakers. Your testimony can potentially bring about positive change and improve the lives of others. There was a time that for a very long time, my supervisor with my other job had asked me to testify at the State House for about 6 months. I was very nervous. As you can tell, I'm nervous now. But I really get shy to speak in front of a large amount of people and do public speaking. But finally, I ended up testifying on a bail reform bill that they were trying to get passed into legislation for about 3 years. I told my personal story. Like I said, I was nervous. Even at one point, I almost wanted to cry, but I didn't. I kept myself composed. But after telling my personal story and my lived experience, they ended up not passing that bill. And it was a very big win for criminal justice. And I was really happy about that because I got my chance to tell my story, my lived experience, and really had the legislators and the community really get a chance to connect with me and what I went through. So just in all conclusion, everyone's voice matters, and that collective work and action can lead to positive change and meaningful change. So I'm really looking forward to hear about when it is you get nervous about telling your story, but everybody's voices matter. And yeah, pretty much that's about it. Just tell your story, don't be nervous, make sure it connects to the issue at hand, and just be yourself.
Thank you, Ophelia, for that passion. Our next speaker is Linda Bundy, who's a retired teacher who has just begun testifying over the last few years. And she's just going to share about testifying even when you're nervous.
Thank you, Olivia. So, public speaking is not my strong suit, to say the least. I'm always nervous, and I always have my testimony written in front of me. But you can gradually progress and grow towards testifying in person. You don't have to start out with that. The hearings on bills are live streamed, so you can watch the live stream remotely just to see how the process goes and what it looks like. And a simple way that you can show your opinion is to sign in to support or oppose a bill on the state website. If you feel you want to say more and address it more specifically, you can submit your testimony electronically. You can attach it as a PDF or even just copy it and paste it into the box on the web page. So it's simple to get your voice in there. And then you can start attending the hearings in person. You don't have to testify. You can just sign in whether you support or oppose the bill. And there again, being there and seeing how it works does it becomes more familiar to you, and also seeing the committee members, seeing how they interact with each other and how they interact with the public does put you more at ease. And you know, the more that you do it, it does become a little bit easier. And I do think that the committee members appreciate your presence there, and they really do listen. And again, you don't have to take questions. I still have not taken questions when I testify. That might be my next step. So I mean, basically that's all. I started out very slowly. Everything was remote, and then gradually worked my way up to being in the room and then speaking. So, you know, step by step at your own pace, whatever you're comfortable with. No matter where you participate in this process, you're having your voice heard. So, thank you.
And I just want to sort of amplify what Linda had to say. If you want to, if you're on this calendar, you can do remote sign in, and you can put your personal information. You select the date of the hearing, so you can select, for example, Monday. You can select the House Education Committee, House Bill 1014, which is a bill that would allow high school students to register, or, you know, to know how to register to vote. You select that you're a member of the public and you're representing yourself. You want to upload your testimony here in PDF form, and you want to make sure you're saying I support or oppose the bill. Make sure to say I support. You upload your testimony, or you can type your testimony in the box here below, and, you know, final review and hit submit. This does have to be in a PDF format, and not a huge PDF. So just to, you know, so if you have a problem uploading testimony, this is the portal where you upload your testimony. If you're going in person, you want to bring, you know, 20 copies in the House committee, or 5 copies in the Senate committee of your testimony. I do often upload to the portal, but then send an email to the committee with my testimony. As you know, the portal is the public record of your testimony, but not all committee members check that portal. So sending an email with your written testimony is really important. Also, if Liz and I are going to a committee in person and you can't be there, you know, call on one of us. We might be able to hand deliver a paper copy of your testimony, because I do think probably they're going to read the paper copy that's in front of them first, the email second, and the portal third. So those are my tips as far as that. When I first started doing this, people said, always 3-hole punch your testimony. I don't know that that's quite the rule these days, but many of the legislators have binders that they put these written testimony documents in. And on that note, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. So if anyone has a question on testimony, or we've all covered the basis. So you can either raise your hand or add it to the chat. Sarah, thank you.
Hi, Olivia. Nice to, very well presented. So I went to Concord today, and I was hoping to not testify. I wasn't prepared to testify, but to attend 3 or 4 different bills. One was actually a constitutional amendment, and the others were regarding reproductive rights. And I have to admit it, the first one started at 1 o'clock, and I have to admit I got there just about 1 o'clock due to being up in New London earlier for a meeting. But anyways, long story short is I got in there and it was in room 100, which is, as many of you know, is a small room. I did get to go in and I did sign in a pro for all of the bills, and they were, but they were all going to be in that room. I tried to stay to listen and was asked very quickly to leave the room because there was only no standing room. And I went out to the hallway and there were probably 30 people out in the hallway that couldn't get in, and many of them wanted to testify. There was no audio visual outside. I just thought, why is this being held in such a small room? Even signing in was outrageous. You were squeezing in between people in this tiny little table, and it certainly was not welcoming at all. So I just don't know if that was on purpose, knowing that there's going to be, and I did see a lot of oppositions on the people who signed in. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading something in here that really wasn't so, but I was really upset. I left because I knew the rest of them would be staying in for the next 3, all similar, all reproductive rights. And I'm not going to stand out in the hallway for the next 2 hours. One of the women I spoke to out in the hallway said, I can't believe they even won't let people in that are testifying, that had signed up to testify. So here we were with not even being able to hear anything. So that's my one big gripe, and I don't know if you can address that. The
I
other
think Liz
thing is,
ready to address that, so.
okay, I just had one quick other comment. I know people have said that the committee is listening. I have a hard time when the committee chair didn't even show up till 3 minutes into when the one that was presenting the initial, this was the constitutional amendment. She was 3 minutes into her testimony before the chair even showed up, and then the chair sat down and proceeded to write and talk to other people. I felt there were only 2 members that were actually appearing to listen, and it's very disconcerting. So I don't know if you can address either one of those,
Well,
Olivia.
let me address the first one, because before COVID, we had situations like that where some very serious bills were being held. The hearings were being held in tiny, tiny rooms. And we'd cram as many people as we could into the room. The rest were in the hall. And finally, I think there was enough publicity about this that they started moving hearings. So it was scheduled for, let's say, room 101. And then they'd say, all right, give us a minute. We've found another room. We're all tramping up to room 307 or something. And the whole crowd would tramp up to the larger room. And we did that one time with an election law bill, and we were still filling that room. And there were lines down there, and they said, okay, we're not going to start the hearing yet. We've got Reps Hall. We're all going to troop over to Reps Hall. So it took a good half hour before people were ready to start the hearing. I think that needs to be publicized. The press was on it a few years ago. And if they're still
Right.
doing that on a topic where they knew that reproductive rights and abortion issues were going to draw a big crowd, they were wrong not to schedule it for a larger room to begin with.
Well, you
And-
know me, Liz, I did speak up to just the person that was, politely, and he said, you can't stand there. As you'll see, this big sign on the door saying no standing room, no, nobody can stand. So going out, like I said, there were a lot of people there. And I said, well, there were a couple of people on the side they were standing. Well, they must be press. I said, I simply said, why didn't you schedule a
Right.
larger room?
So
Well,
I
there
think
are-
it's
he said-
worth
he
a
said-
formal protest, Sarah.
Right, he said, oh, there are no larger rooms, and I said, okay,
true.
really, first time I polite, but really, I was surprised that the whole sign-in should have been out in the hallway. They couldn't get near it. You were breathing on each other and squeezing literally between each other to sign on.
Yeah.
So thank you
So-
for that comment, because I thought I was being just,
No, not at all. And it's worth if this was a House bill, it's worth a letter to the Speaker of the House or to the Senate president if it was a Senate bill.
Well,
And
this
say,
was
this is
Senate,
not the way it
was,
should be treated.
right. It started
I-
with these all Senate, but go ahead.
I will say that you have to advocate for a bigger room. So if you know, if you have friends that are inside the room, asking them when they testify to say there's lots of people outside that can't be here, can we recess and have a bigger room? I think it's something that needs to be publicly advocated for. Also, those sign-in sheets, they don't like it, but they can go out to the hallway. And so just grab a copy of the underneath sign-in sheet and bring it out to the hallway so that other people can fill it out. I have done that a number of times. I know they don't like that when you start like bring your own clipboard and pass it around in the hallway, but I have done that before. And I think it's also it's not recognizing the citizens that took their time to show up. You drove a fair amount of ways to go to Concord, and it's a little bit disrespectful. So I think it's okay to follow up. Henry, do you have tips
And
on
not
this?
to, and not to mention, there were 3 more hearings after that in the same room. This wasn't just this was an all
Right.
afternoon thing. And I knew the others were gonna stay, so there was no reason to stay.
Henry, thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, different committees are led by different chair people and they have different approaches. Sometimes if the chair doesn't really care for the bill and doesn't want to hear a lot of testimony, they're not going to make it very accommodating. But most of the chair people are fair and, to your point, if you bring it up in the committee, that there are a lot of people here outside that can't hear or whatever, could we please get this to a bigger room? If they can, or they can go to the reps hall, which is always available. You put them on the spot like that, sometimes you'll get success, not all the time, but
And oftentimes it's sometimes if you get a hold of a staff person of one of the Senate aides. So I don't know what committee that is, but like, I'll just say Tricia is the committee aide for the Senate Election Law Committee. And sometimes she can be helpful in helping get the room moved. You sort of, send a message to the committee aide and say, hey, the finance room is open and it's a big room that's empty. Can we move there? That can be helpful. Other questions on how to testify? Oh, and I will also say, Sarah, because you brought up a good point. Arrive early. It's always good to get to the committee room before the hearing starts. It's always good to sort of be able to chat in the hallway. It always takes extra time to park in Concord. So like to try to arrive to a committee room early so that you could get a seat. So it's also a good tip to arrive early. Go ahead, Bob. If you want to unmute.
Thanks. For those who don't know how to create a PDF when submitting testimony, in the past, we have sent our presentations to Doreen, who can convert our presentations into PDF. And I wonder if that's still an option, Olivia?
Yes, if you are testifying on an open democracy priority bill, Doreen will be happy to help you convert something to a PDF. So if you need that technology help, let us know. But also it's pretty, those of you who are familiar enough with a computer, you can oftentimes save a document as a PDF to submit your testimony. Griselli asked a good question about committees will often hear a bill. The Senate will hear a bill, the Senate will vote on a bill. You can get a second committee. Sometimes things go to a finance committee. So oftentimes if you miss the first hearing, there is other opportunities to publicly testify to. Oh, Catherine asks a really great question about remote testimony. So during COVID, they let us remote testify. Henry, do you think they're ever bringing it back? I'm turning that one over to you.
Remote testimony, I don't think so. Unless, the pandemic gets bad again, they used it reluctantly, at least the Republican leadership. I think it would have been a lot different with the Democratic leadership. They were pushing for continued use of it. But I don't see it coming back soon. I'm glad that they still have, they kept the streaming, so that if you don't want to testify, you can at least watch it. I think that's a good thing that they kept, because there are times where you can't make it or whatever, but you want to see what's going on, and you can watch it remotely, or you can watch it later at night, because they're recorded. So that's a good thing, but I don't think that they're going to have remote testimony anytime soon.
I agree with Henry. I don't think that remote testimony is coming back, but if you compare where we are now with pre-pandemic, now you can upload your testimony via the website. You can
Yeah.
send it in that way, and you can watch it online. We didn't have any of that pre-pandemic. So there is a good side to the pandemic,
Yeah.
for all the agony it caused us. It does let the people see the legislature at work, and it lets us submit comments much more easily. Yeah.
And I know that Bob Perry has recorded himself giving testimony and emailed the link to the committee. So that's another way. I don't know how many of them would watch you give testimony, but you could try. But I also do think during our redistricting campaign, we asked the chairperson to have an evening testimony. Would you be willing to have testimony in the evening? And they did accommodate that request for one hearing and had an evening testimony. And I know the state budget does do an evening testimony sometimes to be able to get testimony from people who are working during the day. So Lois, see your hand up.
Great. Thanks for all the great information from everybody. This is a legal question for any lawyer on this call or somebody with this kind of experience. I watched all day the hearing that you were in, Sarah, and saw exactly what you were talking about. It was terrible because the view is from behind, the crowded chaos that was going on for those coming in to witness. There was an ACLU representative there the whole time. And my question is this a situation? I mean, we have a constitutional right to these hearings being public, correct? It's in our Constitution, correct? Is this some sort of, not lawsuit, but class action potential request of the legislative body to plan for moving a hearing when it is clear that the majority of the witnesses are going to have to stand outside and hear nothing, and bring it as a class action request, not a lawsuit, because I'm sure that's not the only hearing where that happened.
I could probably quickly just address it. I think the courts have been very reluctant to get involved or to tell the legislature what they should and shouldn't do. I think the state Supreme Court would probably stay out of that. I think there'd probably be better chance of getting something done, again, by directing it either towards the press, the leadership. Sometimes it falls on deaf ears with the leadership, but I think the public pressure eventually, and maybe not initially, but I think there's probably better success there. There have been things, I mean, the whole thing about the remote testimony, even Representative Cody and his participation during COVID. He couldn't come to the State House. He's handicapped and whatnot, and was compromised. Didn't attend, and the Democrats brought it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said they didn't want to get involved in that. I mean, the Supreme Court typically has let the legislature make its rules and how it's going to proceed. So that's just my first thought.
Henry, there's a question about from Kathy about if a bill dies, when can it be re-brought up?
So there's
rules?
yeah, so there's you think of the biennium. So last year was the first year of the biennium. This is the second year of the biennium. If a bill is brought up and killed in the first year of the biennium, under the rules, it cannot be reintroduced the second year. Now, that's at the judgment call of the speaker. And if the bill is worded a little differently, they can be cute and it could come back. Ultimately, his decision, the speaker's decision, can ultimately be challenged and the full House can vote on it. Now, if the Republican is in the majority and the Democrats want to challenge the ruling, and there are more Republicans in the room on a session day and they challenge the speaker, chances are his decision is going to be upheld. But typically, and I find they do largely follow the rule where if it's been killed in the first year of this session, it can't come back in the second year. It could come back when the new legislature gets elected the year after that. So if it's killed in the first year, it can't come back till 2 years later, typically.
Gracelli asked a good question about if a lot of the committee members aren't present. How do you have your voice heard? I know that I have once asked if they could recess a hearing, and they did sort of keep a hearing open to the next time, held it open so that more voices could be heard. But I know that that's not often the case, that they'll recess a hearing till everyone can be present. But many committee members are committee members of other committees or are introducing bills. So oftentimes some of these scheduling conflicts are just inevitable, and it's not that they're trying to be rude to you. They just are having to run out of the room to testify on another bill. But sometimes they do recess if you are polite and request them to recess the hearing so other voices could be heard. Great. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And also say that Henry, Liz, and I are all available for additional questions. If people are testifying on bills for the very first time and want to email questions, feel free to use Ophelia as a resource. We are a supportive team where we want to practice democracy together. So thank you all for being with us tonight. And I hope you all enjoy your testifying at the State House this year, and have any additional questions. I will say that I've noticed there are more, seems like there is a much better tone than in years past. So continue to just remember to be polite, know that your voice matters, and the decorum will continue to go. And even when we don't win things this year, we keep trying year after year. So sometimes, you know, we've got to go to the State House a couple of years in a row. Liz, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to see all these people at the State House at some point, or at least signing in online. Wouldn't that be fun? We'll have a party. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
You.